There?
Yeah, we're coming on in a second. Listen to the music. I don't hear the music, Tony. Okay. I guess we're live. I never heard the music. Are we live? I assume we're live. Sorry about this, folks. Sorry to be confused. That
You
happens a
are
lot.
live, Don. I don't know why you didn't hear the music. That's
I never heard
odd.
it. Okay, so sorry. I'm listening for my prompts, and then when I hear my keyboard
I
is
had it
not
right
working
rolling right
today.
now. So you don't hear it.
My
Go ahead.
okay, my keyboard's not working, so hopefully we'll get on track here. This is Don Jeffries, obviously. Welcome to iProtest. We come to you every Friday at the same time from just outside the Swamp Fest, Washington, D.C. As the man says that I couldn't hear this time. My guest today is somebody I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. He's one of these critics of the Warren Report and JFK assassination researcher that hasn't gotten his due, and I want to try to give a little tip of the hat at him today. Jim Gochenaur has been working on this for a long time, and he testified before both the Church Committee and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which not many people in our research community, I don't think any, can say that. So, Jim, I welcome you to the show, and we're just going to have a free-flowing conversation. You talk about whatever you want because you have a wealth of knowledge and experience, so I'm sure it'll be fascinating. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to begin by saying something I hope the research committee and yourself would be able to absorb. About 3 weeks ago, I tried and tried again to get portions or all of the details in this man's archives. His name is Richard E. Sprague, and he was one of the first generation critics. Yep. He went down to Dallas area in 65 and 66, and he located a lot of photographers, filmmakers, and people that were in the Dealey Plaza area. And he published a list of these people in a magazine called Computers and Animation.
Yes. And
his archives is just filled. I met him personally, face to face, at the Dallas SeaTac Airport, March 29th, 1971. And Richard, I talked to him on the phone a few times, and he said he'd like to meet me. And in between flights from Seattle to Vancouver, he was giving a presentation on his photography archive. And so I met him at the airport, and he was very nervous. We moved from concourse to concourse because he didn't want anybody to listen in, or he didn't want to be available for a spook following him, I guess. But after about 2 or 3 moves, we sat down and talked. And he talked about all the photographs that he accumulated, and he showed me a binder with a lot of pictures of people, I would say, that are in a crowd. And that really fascinated me because when I was talking with Secret Service agent Elmer Moore of the Secret Service, he was at the time in Seattle, he was the secret agent in charge. So he was a pretty authoritative person for the law enforcement activities of the Secret Service in the Seattle area. And he showed me in May 7th of 1971, I got to talk to him personally, and he showed me a large satchel full of documents and photographs. And a lot of the photographs that I paged through before he stopped me was like Richard E. Sprague's. It was pictures of people in the crowd around Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. So I was just, oh, can I have copies? And he said, absolutely not. So I was stymied right there. But as the years rolled on, I found out that Richard Sprague had passed away in the 2000, 2001 to 3. I'm not sure exactly when he passed, but he donated his archives with all those photographs to a small college in Massachusetts. Then I contacted them. They said we transferred everything to the CIA's favorite university, Georgetown. So this was done time of the COVID thing, and I called the people at Georgetown. They said, well, we can't do anything for you until it's the end. We're cutting off access to the library. And then 4 weeks ago, I Googled it again, and I found out that from Georgetown University, they transferred Richard Sprague's archive to the CIA library. So guess what? We're not going to be able to view it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, so people know. I just want to make sure
it's a template.
Yeah, I was going to say I want to make sure people understand Richard E. Sprague.
Right, rather than Richard A. Sprague.
Right. Richard A. Sprague was the first, and it seemed like he was going to do a pretty good job. Chief counsel for the House Select Committee of Assassination. He was ousted in a power play led by the media, and Robert Blakey came in and made a secrecy agreement with the CIA and so forth. But Richard E. Sprague, author of the probably best known for the book, The Taking of America, 1, 2, 3. He did write a great article for Computers and Animation magazine as well, did some great research. So here, this guy has a wealth of knowledge and pictures and everything. And what Jim is discovering is that we don't know where it is now. If it's out there anywhere, it's in the CIA's library, which the general public can't access. So why would the CIA? Why do you think the CIA would have his files?
I'm going to have to reread his book. I think he might have spiked onto something. You know, that they just can't.
Yeah, I mean, his research was certainly important, but you go back, because I want to talk about how long did it take you to become interested in the JFK assassination? When did you start researching? Because you must have been doing it early before me, because you testified for the church committee was like 1975. So you must have been researching before then. So how did you come into contact with any of the early critics like Mark Lane or Weisberg or any of them?
Well, Weisberg and I talked quite a bit in an exchange of letters through the early 70s. And he sort of was my tutor to, confront Elmer Moore about Dr. Perry issue. What had happened to us is that in February of 1970, I was at the University of Washington, Seattle, going for a master's degree in ceramics/art. And one of the requirements to get the degree is to teach in a Seattle high school for at least one course, one class. And I picked Garfield High School, and I was there 2 times a week. Now, Richard Iverson, who was the dean of fine arts for Garfield High School, got me and the other art instructors together and say, we want to put together a big show of faculty and student art in June of 1970. So I got together with a class, and we looked at photographs that have been taken and put in the slides of Minoan and Greek ceramics. And what was important about it, and what I wanted to stress for the students, is that these civilizations depicted on their pottery their history, their myths, everyday things that happened. And I suggested that we all do the same thing in my class. We'll pick a contemporary thing in history and emblazon it on either a ceramic sculpture or pot. And I was stymied because I was trying to figure out what I'm going to contribute to it. And I was in my favorite bookstore, and I came across the book 4 days. And 4 days, and it was, AP, and I was really interested because all of a sudden the Milwaukee Sentinel, that was from my hometown. So I picked it up and was paging through it. Page 18, Mary Mormon's famous photograph. The fence line almost, and I think, depicts somebody behind the fence. And I blew it up. I was involved in getting into photography at that time. I became a real addict. And I thought to myself, well, Mick, I'm going to take that and I'm going to, put it on my ceramic sculpture. Problem is the resolution of Mary's photograph. So I was going to say, who would help me on this? And I thought, well, maybe the FBI would. So I called the FBI. Very polite agent was on the phone. And he said, I can't help you. I don't think the FBI can, I don't think we have it. But I think I can get you over if you'd hold on to the line to the secret agent in charge of the Seattle District Secret Service, Elmer Moore. And Elmer, he told me he was in charge of, all the photography for the the Secret Service in their investigations. And I hung, there was a little bit of a relay, and the time thing. And then Elmer Moore had introduced himself. He said, how can I help you? I'm Elmer Moore. And so I told him about what my project was. And he says, well, Jim, I handled that photograph myself. I sent it to the naval group near Baltimore that was photo analysis people there. And I gave it to the FBI. I said, okay. And he said, why are you interested in this? And I said, why are you a critic? Have you read the Warren Report? And I said, no, I'm not a critic. I'm just looking for a better picture. And he says, well, you're out of luck. It's a Polaroid. Well, I didn't get that at first. Mm-hmm. So the thing rolled down to the thing of him lecturing me of don't listen to Mark Lane. I was starting to get a little bit warped on it. I interjected that I'm not really interested as a critic. I'm just trying to put together this project. And so he softened up a little bit. And he said, Jim, the whole process there of me being the lead investigator has made me, and this was the key point for me to continue with him. He said, I became, through the, investigation of this thing, a student of American political assassinations. And I said, oh, wow. I said, I made a real long report in my high school history class about John Wilkes Booth. And he says, oh, well, Booth, although he had people hanging around him, you could almost say that he was, in fact, a kind of a lone nutter. And I said, no, I disagree with you. So we started going back and forth about Booth. And I brought up the fact that what had happened, in March of 1864, there was a cavalry raid using the Union troops on Richmond. And there was one flank, several regiments that attacked from the east of Richmond, and it was led by a Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren. And Morris says, "How do you spell Dahlgren?" He became interested. And I said, "Well, what happened is that they killed the Confederate Home Guard, wiped out Dahlgren's units, and they captured his paperwork in a stash, and in it was handwritten note to run into Richmond, try and capture Jefferson Davis or kill him, and capture or kill the Confederate cabinet." And so I thought it was sort of a revenge thing that they put Booth, I believe, in a kind of a situation where he was going back and forth from Montreal. He was definitely a Confederate Secret Service dude. And Moore and I went into that more, and then we started to talk about Garfield, which he thought was something fishy about it.
Interesting.
McKinley. We touched on the guy in Milwaukee who shot Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
And then he told me that he was very much involved with interviewing Ruby and his family. Then he said, "Jim, I'll tell you what, you're a student. You'll become my student. And I want you to give me 3 good questions about when he and Warren and Ford went to Dallas in, I think, the June of that would have been 1964, and how the interview asked me 3 good questions about the interview of Ruby." I said, "Okay, I'm in." And we were on the phone for quite a while. I was thinking, "Wow, this guy's ahead of the. He must have time, you know."
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of flipped it around in my mind, and I decided, yeah, I'd look into this. So the University of Washington Library had all the 26 volumes. I went in and I took a look at that interview, and I was startled. Rankin asked Jack Ruby, "Well, we came into some information that you met some people at the Carousel Club. You met Bernard Weissman,
Mm-hmm.
and you met Tibbets and an oil man." And Ruby didn't deny it. He just said, "Who is the oil man?" And I wrote this down. And then the other thing happened to be that Elmer told me that he was a registered polygraph examiner in California. And Ruby was screaming that he wanted either truth serum or a polygraph test that the world would know about him and why he did it. And it's really interesting. Ruby then says, "What do you think, Elmer? What do you think more?" Pardon me. He kept on, like, he was sort of, Ruby was sort of being prompt, wanted to know what, why. I think Moore said, "Yeah, don't take the polygraph test." And the third question that he put up was that it was the normal one. Why in the heck couldn't you have taken Ruby to Washington? I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
And I think I kept on calling his number and getting a secretary and said, "Well, we'll relay your message, Jim." And finally, I got a hold of him, and I said, I got some questions for you that you had assigned me." And he says, "Oh, shoot." And all of a sudden he stopped and he says, "We couldn't deal with taking Ruby to Washington because there was no security situation available for us." And blah, blah, blah. The he went into a whole list of things, and then he said, "Well, I gotta go. And that was the end of that. I couldn't get the two questions that were more important in, which kept me on the line, so to speak. I'd been talking back and forth about on the phone and through correspondence with Harold Weisberg about, how do I approach this guy? And he was sort of, every time I contacted Harold, he was kind of strange. He was working at the time on the MLK business.
Yes.
And he talked at length. I mean, my telephone bill was crazy about that. But he did say that he thought Moore was a true villain. Didn't know why he could sleep at night. And so this intrigued me. In March, I talked with, this important fellow, Richard Eastbrake. And on May 7th, the seventh day in May, I decided to, heck, just go ahead and, talk with Moore. I'll storm his office. Maybe I'll get kicked out, but maybe he will talk. And between March and May, I got him on the phone. He said, "Well, why don't we meet at this restaurant down by the federal courthouse?" And I said, "Okay." And I showed up. He didn't. It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
And he called me at home. How he knew my number is interesting. Anyway, he called me, he effusively apologized. He was so busy, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, "Okay, that's it. My last round and roll of the dice on this. I'm going to go up the steps there at the federal courthouse, and I'm going to talk to him." Well, I completely forgot on May 7th, there was a big protest that was to honor, they called it Days of Rage, the shooting at Kent State and the war. I forgot about it. So I took the bus downtown, and all I saw was squadrons of anti-war police, and I definitely was very interested in trying to, how am I going to get through this? So I had my camera on me. I'm taking pictures of the riot. Some young girl yells out, "That guy's a pig. He's a photographer for the police." And so I'm running away, and I'm saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to fall over dead." And I got to another intersection there on 4th and 5th Avenue, and cops are beating the heck out of this guy, and I was taking pictures of it, and the cop comes up to me and says, "Give me that camera." And I says, "No way." And I'm running again. I finally made it to the courthouse. And in Seattle at the time, the old courthouse, federal building, there's terraces of steps you have to go up. And so I finally made it up there, and I was really, very, very surprised. There was no guards. I walked into a nearly empty building at about, I would say 10 after 4 in the afternoon, and nobody was there. So I went up and I looked, and it was on the 5th floor. I got on the elevator and went up, and I was walking along these marble floored on that floor, and my tennis shoes were squeaking. It was really annoying. I finally got to near the office where they were, and I noticed a glass enclosure of events and stuff. And I looked in there, and I got a reflection of myself. I was sweating. Here I am with a beard, long hair, with a satchel, and cameras. And I think, these people would kick me out of the office. They're going to think I'm from the Weather Underground. And I steeled myself. I walked in. It was so silent in the hallways. But as soon as I got into the Secret Service office, there were 2 teletype machines just chattering away. Sounded like machine gun fire. And there was a gal that was the secretary receptionist that had some sort of gear on her ear, and she's typing something up, and she finally sees me and freaks her out. She almost jumped out of her chair. I said, I'd like to talk with Elmer Moore. And she sort of stuttered out that, well, maybe he went home. And then a young agent said, why do you want to talk with Elmer? I said, oh, I've been in contact with him since early last year. I just want to talk to him about something about the Kennedy case. He says, wait a minute. So he says, have a seat in our lounge, which was a folding chair. And I sat there, and this jolly sort of heavy set guy come in with two agents by himself. And he says, you must be the Jim that I talked with on the phone. I said, yeah. He says, well, are you having fun rioting? And I said, well, absolutely not. I'm being chased by everybody. And he said, well, we got to talk. And I said, yay. After all this, I finally get to talk to this guy face to face. And he introduces me to the secretary and one of the young agents, and all shook hands and everything. And as we were going into his office, which was sort of a conference room too, is that he introduced me to this guy. I can't think of his name right now. At any rate, his age, Carl Hardy was his name. And Hardy wouldn't shake hands with me. And we're all going into his conference room, and somebody yells out, you got a phone call from Washington, Elmer. And so he says, I got to leave. I sat down on this big table, conference table, put my camera on it. And this guy, Hardy, leans over me, and I could see his veins in his bald head, twitching. And he says, I don't understand what you people want. This was the most comprehensive investigation in the history of the Secret Service. And I said, all I want to do is learn Moore. More. He says, don't be a wise ass. And Moore comes in, and I believe Hardy pulled him in. He says, don't talk to this guy. I could hear that. And then they close the door, and they're shouting and yelling. And in comes Elmer Moore. And I said, well, listen, if I'm too much of a disruption here, I can leave. He says, oh, no. We just a lot of stress. We got a terrible overload of cases. And I said, well, my idea is that I think that Carl should go down on his ration of coffee. And Moore started to laugh. We were starting to get along. Well, my point is that it was easy to establish a little bit of rapport here. And he said, well, Jim, what would you do with anything I tell you? And I says, well, Elmer, I've done some writing. I would like to be your biographer. And he says, oh, hell no. I took an oath on this case, and I don't want to spend my retirement in jail. I said, oh, no, here we go. I'm going to be ousted, But he says, I'll tell you what, if you follow this thing, we'll talk. I said, okay, what? He says, no recordings. I won't record you, and you won't record me. Next, you will not take any notes. I said, okay. He says, and the third thing is, if you make public anything I tell you, I will deny it. And he sat in his big chair and he's rocking back. And he says, I'll tell you what, there is a fourth thing. If I ever hear of, or I could become aware of you talking with Carl Hardy, I'll make your life miserable. And I said, oh, okay, threat.
Wow.
And then he says, I'll tell you what, let's get to know each other. I'll start out. I'm from the Bay Area, Oakland, and I graduated from college in 1932. And then I went on to the Sheriff's Department of Alameda County that covers Oakland. Then he said, when World War II broke out, I joined Coast Guard Intelligence. And I said, oh, wow.
Hmm.
Okay. And then he said, after the war, he joined the Secret Service, and he was appointed to the Chicago district from 47 to 52. And then from 52 to 65, he was in the San Francisco district. And then he was promoted to secret agent in charge, which was a real interesting situation. He went on about a number of things, and he said, it's your turn. So I told him about my area that I lived in Wisconsin, and I graduated from college at the University of South Dakota in '68. And then I got this honor to be in a master's program at the University of Washington. And so from there, we went to discussing a situation. It's probably not well known. He was talking about the idea of making assumptions under pressure. He led out with a thing of when he was an investigator for the Coast Guard Intelligence, they were doing a background check on a very good type of secretary in the Bay Area. And it turned out that a couple of people came across her, and she did with apparently Elmer, saying that the secretary applicant was a drunk and cheated on a lot of things, which wasn't true according to Elmer. And he said that if we'd gone with the idea that this is really true without looking it up, verifying it, they wouldn't have had this good person. Then he says, I'll give you an example in the JFK case. Right after Ruby had shot Oswald, a lady by the name of Vivian Curry walked into the Secret Service office and said that she had sold mini phones or bugs and spyware, electronic spyware, to Jack Ruby in '59, early '60, several $1,000s worth. And she identified Ruby from pictures that were available in the national press and from this is interesting, the Secret Service in LA. LA called the district people, Sorrells in Dallas, and said, this is something we better look into. And what they did, Elmer had a report, a document that stated that the woman was mistaken. She had given the equipment from Ader Company to Barney Weinstein, which is total joke. Neither one, I mean, Barney doesn't look anything like Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was sort of a compact, grumpy looking guy, and Barney Weinstein's this tall, thin, sort of out of it type of guy. And he says, you know what? We didn't go and back up the idea that she sold it to Jack Ruby, which I thought was very interesting. We went on to talk about various things about, motorcades. I told him about when my dad and my friend saw Jack Kennedy in a motorcade in Milwaukee going down Chase Avenue pretty darn fast. And there were agents on the back of the limo. And here's a friendly city. It's not like Dallas. I mean, and he said, well, I can't help you. The only time I was on protective was with Harry Truman at his Key West vacation situation. And I intersect. I heard he knew how to swear very good. And Morris said, damn right. And so we said, we got, there's all kinds of, what I'm trying to say is that we were building up a rapport that we could talk back and forth. And the first questions I put out was about Lee Harvey Oswald. And I said, Elmer, is the Oswald that came out of the Soviet Union the same one that went into the Soviet Union? And he said, do you mean a different person? I said, not necessarily. I said, he might have been turned, or he was programmed from the CIA to be turned. And he said, I can't help you because the CIA wasn't very cooperative with the Secret Service. I have a lot of data and read about the fact that the Russians like to have husband-wife teams come in and sit in a sleeper situation for a long time. And all of a sudden, stay tuned, you might have an assignment. You might be doing everything, perfectly legal and, really underground. And Moore sort of skipped over everything like that. And I said, what about his handler, I think, George de Mohrenschildt? And Moore said, Jim, in baseball terms, you've hit a triple. And he says, it's the top of the ninth inning. You're down by 1 run. Who's going to hit you in to win the game? And I said, oh, you are, Elmer. You're the heavy hitter. And he says, oh, no, I'm not. He says, I'm only in the minor leagues. You gotta get information from a higher source. And I said, oh, wow. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a hint. I said, oh. And he said, de Mohrenschildt's son-in-law, Gary Taylor, had a lot of contact with Lee Harvey Oswald. He would drive the Oswalds around. He stated that he gave money to the Oswalds from his dad or his stepdad, or his in-law there, George de Mohrenschildt. And I thought that was interesting. So I couldn't write it down, but I was really trying to remember Gary Taylor, that kind of thing. And he said, the real question with de Mohrenschildt is, who is he really working for?
Yeah.
And I was saying, wow, that's pretty much. And I says, well, he stopped. This guy had I don't know if he was a ventriloquist or what, but he is like he could smile as he was talking, which was interesting to me because he had bad teeth. But the thing that really got me is that he said, Jim, what's your theory on Lee Harvey Oswald? And I said, well, I think he was involved, but he had plenty of help. Moore leaned back in his chair because it could swivel back and forth. And he says, you'd probably be very surprised to know I agree with you. And I nearly fainted. It was really interesting at that point. And I was looking for a way of introducing how did you handle Dr. Perry?
Yeah.
And it was coming up because he said this. He said the reenactments were inaccurate because they used
let me interrupt for a second, Jim. I just want to set the stage for those of you who aren't experts on this. Elmer Moore's importance, really, I think, is lying in what we're going to talk about here with Dr. Malcolm Perry. Dr. Malcolm Perry was one of the doctors at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, and he very notably called the wound in JFK's throat an entrance wound that was later apparently obliterated by a tracheotomy. So unfortunately, we couldn't see the particulars. But that press conference, they went on to apparently lose the video of it or something. But lots of references out there to him being the initial one. And then he obviously came under a lot of pressure because that completely contradicted the official story, because if JFK was shot in the throat from front, Lee Harvey Oswald was behind. So right there you have a de facto conspiracy. So go ahead. So I just wanted to make sure people knew who he was.
Definitely. Well, one of the things he said, we know that Oswald met with a known subversive a day before the assassination. And I said, oh, who was it? Was it domestic or foreign? And he says, no, I'm not going to go any further with that. And I said, okay. Then I said, I had read somewhere where you pressured Dr. Perry into talking about an entrance wound in the throat. And he says, oh, well, do you hang out with Mark Lane? He says, well, I'll tell you, I went to the hospital with another agent named Roger Warner, and we had copies of the autopsy report. And what I did was I pulled Perry aside and I asked him about an anatomical term that I didn't understand. And then I said, just like he said, that could it have been an entrance wound or an exit wound? And he kept that up. He says, I didn't bang his head against the locker room there. I was just persistent, which is true. I read a number of comments by various researchers that not only did our friend Moore pressure and threaten Perry, but he also did that with a number of other people.
Yeah.
He had a number of sessions with Marion Baker, but there's no record of it, you know. So the situation is, I'm thinking that Moore was there to loosen up all of the, the pop-up problems that they may have with timing, with directly with Perry. He was very emphatic about the fact he just kept up, and I wasn't rough with him. I wasn't harsh, and he kept it up. I think he was,
Mm-hmm.
I think this guy was Moore was sent in there, and he said he was ordered to do it. I asked him who ordered him, and he says Inspector Tom Kelly, who was running the investigation in Dallas. He said they disbanded when LBJ put the FBI on the case.
Well, Perry, with the testimony of other people, that Perry was really, shook up afterwards, and he was under intense pressure. Isn't there indication that some people claimed he got a call from the White House itself to try to pressure him?
I didn't pick that up. I think I have a friend who interviewed Dr. Perry about 4 weeks before he passed. And he brought up continuously Elmer Moore. He called him on the phone at home. He called a reporter for the newspaper there in Dallas about the fact that went through the base of the neck and out the front of the throat and then down and hit Connolly and all this stuff. It seems to me that at this point, when I was talking with him, he was serious, but he didn't give me too much problems. I asked him if Oswald knew David Ferry, and he very abruptly said yes. And I started to ask another question. He says, "What's your next question?" So we kept it at that kind of a report. And then we talked about Ruby, of course, and he went to Ruby's sister's apartment And he said, she was a batshit crazy woman. And I said, but he said, after a while, I figured it out. She wouldn't answer questions directly. She didn't want to. She'd change pace or bring up something else. But while he was at that apartment, he saw a picture that he claimed to me. I asked him what it depicted of Ruby and a woman and another man and a woman that's sort of like a dining club. And Moore asked if he could borrow the photograph, he'd get it back to her. And he said, when I showed the photograph to Kelly, Kelly took it, and that was the end of the story. There was he was sort of embarrassed he couldn't come back and give the photograph back. But the next thing is that we talked at length about the representation that Ruby had and Moore was emphatic that that guy Howard, the first guy, was the best case. He knew of Belly because of being in the area, and he's not really a defense attorney. He is a torts guy, and he said that the way he insulted everybody, he was very certain to lose the case.
Well, his first attorney, Howard, was one of the very strange deaths of the three men that met in George Senator's apartment. All three were dead, I think, within a year or something. And Howard was one of them. I think he died of a heart attack at 40-some years old or something.
Right. It's a very interesting scenario. I didn't really talk about it with Elmer Moore, but what I did talk to him about, and I was very, very interested in this particular sequence. He said that he called Earl Ruby quite a bit about that, and he wanted why he chose Bella, and Ruby wouldn't say it. Earl Ruby wouldn't say much. It had to do with apparently a photograph of the president's wounds that was starting to be distributed or claimed to be, and then they decided, the Ruby family, in quotes, decided to change people. Let me get some light here.
Yeah, we're losing you there. You were looking good before. Just want to Sam Bodie's tree in the chat says a heart attack at 40. Just to let you know, the three people that died in that died within a year after meeting with George Senator, who was Jack Ruby's roommate, alone after Ruby shot Oswald. The other two, one was Jim Cody, who was a reporter, who was the only reporter other than Dorothy Kilgallen, mainstream reporter, who was actually taking notes and planning to write a book about the JFK assassination. He was killed by a karate chop as he exited his shower. And the other one, whose name I forgot, was shot.
Jim Martin.
Was it?
Jim Martin.
Jim Martin. Yeah, he was shot supposedly accidentally while sitting in a police station. I mean, so the heart attack at 40 is actually the most, least suspicious of the three. But needless to say, these are the reasons why so many of us keep going down these rabbit holes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's no problem. In fact, Elmer was saying that his first idea, what he wanted to do, is talk to George Senator, but he didn't have a photograph of him or where he could be located. He probably could have walked into the Dallas Police Department and they would produce him because he was there a number of times. But the thing that interesting to me about this Ruby business comes up with Moore saying that he met with him a number of times by himself.
Yeah.
Usually he takes somebody, like he took, in two instances, he took a guy by the name of Carter, agent, and his tag-along guy, I guess, in Dallas, Roger Warner. But
well, that is interesting, because we've always been told that the only person to get a private interview with Jack Ruby by himself was Dorothy Kilgallen, who Karen Carpenter seems astonished there. Dorothy Kilgallen also, as you know, was almost certainly murdered, died very strangely, and had lots of files, was definitely going to write the mainstream account, of the skeptical account of the Warren Report. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, okay, the next bombshell comes about one of his interviews where he said to me that Ruby was starting to loosen up about why and who and the circumstances. And Moore says, I had to stop him. And I was wondering, what? He says,
you might have told the truth.
Yeah, he says, we didn't want him to expose himself in this as a premeditated act. And I was thinking to myself, because I had an uncle that was a lieutenant of detectives in the Wisconsin area in Walworth County. And when I told him about it, he says, wow, he says, if you're a detective or if you're an investigator, you want to know what's going on. And here they stop Ruby from talking. From that point on, we talked about photographs. When I brought up Black Dog Man and showed him an image of it, he says, oh, that's just shadows, light falling on shadows. Showed him the Hughes, part of the Hughes film, with what appears to be a man in the window next to the 6th floor shooting area. And he says, yeah, that's a problem. And that's all he said. That's a problem. And then he went on to say that I should be able to access through the National Archives Secret Service files on the photographs, which, they're not there. Anyway, we went on, and this is very creepy, talking about the Chicago plot. I said, did you have a chance to interview Thomas Arthur Valley? And he said, who? And I said, Thomas Arthur Valley, the Chicago plot. And you know what he said? Oh, I wasn't allowed to see those files. Wow.
Yeah.
You're the lead investigator and you're not allowed access. The next thing that comes up is I said, well, did you know about Abraham Bolden? And he blew up. That goddamn lying nigger, he said, you're going to have to investigate him. If you want to talk to him, you got to go to this jail in Illinois because we got him. And I said, you got him? And he said, oh, no, this is important. He said, the chief and Tom Kelly, Inspector Kelly. He says, oh, okay. And he says, look, I don't know who you're working for. He pulled out his pistol. He slammed it on the table. He wasn't holding it. He just slammed it on the table. And he said, Jim, who are you working for? And I said, I'm an independent researcher. Sometime I talked to Harold Weisberg. And he sat in a chair. And he says, are you recording me? And I said, no. And he took my camera and disassembled it.
Wow.
I had an SLR. He's looking in it, and he's looking through the bag. I said, do you want to pat me down? And he said, no, that's not. He says, I'm sorry, he says. And then he says, okay, what I want to do now is I want to show you something. So he goes, I'd say maybe about 15 feet to a louvered type of closet door. And he opens it up, gets on his knees, and I think you could hear, at least I thought it was a safe door. And he pulls out this humongous satchel, and he's struggling with it. And I said, can I help you? And he says, no, I'll get it. Throws it up on the table, and he puts some documents on the side. And he said, oh, damn. He says, what I wanted to show you first is on the bottom. So he starts pulling out all this material, and there was a sheaf of photographs that he sat down right in front of me as he's going through it. And so I'm looking through it, right? What I saw in the first thing that came up was a black and white, what would you call it? It was a black and white, like stencil copy of the backyard photograph of Oswald, supposedly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it and I was looking. What's different was the chin area. You know, it looked like it was blurred up, a slight line, you know, in the dot pattern, and it was different in and around the face. And I was thinking, wow. And in the next picture that I looked at, he wasn't aware I was looking through it, was a picture like of the crowd and face after face after face, okay? And all of a sudden he slammed his hand down on the folio. And I says, can I copy? And I says, no. And he finally brought out a mathematics textbook from the carton that he said was in the sniper's nest. And it happened to be a autograph of Roy Truly and Elmer. And he said he got 4 copies, one for the Secretary of the Treasury, one for Chief Rowley, and one for Kelly, and one he kept. And then he closed it up, and he says, we're getting close to the time I have to close this place up. And I said to him, well, what's in the nice, it was a presentation folio that came out, and he looked at it and he pulled it out, and it was a letter from LBJ handwritten to Elmer. And it started out, to our most famous investigator, thank you for your service to me and the country. But it went on for 2 pages, and he flipped it over, and then there were pictures, autograph pictures of LBJ. And a group picture of agents with Elmer, who I have no idea who they were. And then he said, we got to get out of here. And I said to him as we were walking to the front door, I said, well, what did LBJ, what was his idea about the assassination? And he said, oh, LBJ thought it was a very deep conspiracy. We do it to them, they do it to us.
Yeah.
Then we walked down the hall, got in the elevator, and he says, what's your beef about the Vietnam War, Jim? And I said, well, I think it's very immoral to send people into combat without the goal of victory. And he says, here I go again and agreeing with you. And then he sort of hissed. He said, LBJ, he double-crossed everybody. I thought that was, I wanted to follow up on that, you know. And then we got into his car, which was filled with documents in the back seat, and he drove me home. When we got there, I invited him down to my studio in the basement, threw a pot for him, and he said his wife loves pots. And I said, oh, does she like it smoking or chewables?
Yeah.
And he laughed, and he thought
you're something of a young hippie, Jim, it seems, maybe.
I tend to be sort of snide, but I thought, I'm smiling while I'm doing it. Anyway, I introduced him to my ex-wife now, and we were taking care of her teenage daughter. I mean, the teenage daughter from her parents let her out to live with us in Seattle, and baby Shona. And I told him that if his wife liked ceramics, I I'm going to be in the Kirkland Kirkland Craft Show in July. He says, well, we'll show up. And he did. Then we walked to his car, and he said, Jim, your wife looks just like Marina. Do you know that Oswald beat her? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, she lied through her teeth on everything. Is the next thing he said. And he says, Jim, with every case I've ever had, this case is no different. You have to follow the money. And here we are, the Treasury Department, and we can't follow the money. I thought that was, does he mean that they weren't allowed to look into it, or that it was so difficult and crazy they couldn't track it? I don't know. But at any rate, he got in the car, and we're talking as, for about 20 minutes more. And he said, if you're interested in a career in law enforcement, I'll help you. And I said, well, I'm nearly to the end of my program, and to get an MFA, I want to teach, actually. And, but I said I'd think about it. Mm-hmm. And then he says, well, I'll give you a hint. There was a guy by the name of James Hubert Martin that was the manager of Marina's situation. He wanted to get a movie contract, books, helped on a number of promoting things. He and
who was Martin with? Who was he with?
Yeah, right. The Flynn.
But who was Martin with? Was he with the Secret Service? Who was he with?
Who? Martin?
Yeah, Martin.
No, he was a manager of the motel where they put him up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he said you got to see if you can dig into the associations of this man. And I was thinking to myself, well, God, you're the people in the Secret Service. You should be doing this,
Yeah.
But he said that Martin's important because of who he worked with, which the best thing I could come up with was that he was involved with, and he had an acquaintance of the Hunts. I wanted to get in closer about that, but I never did. And so July 16th, I set up photography, ceramics, glass blowing booth, and Moore and his wife, Marion, came and visited me. And Marion was talking with my wife at the time, and she was coddling my little baby, Shona. If you're going to set up at an art festival, bring a crib and a little baby. People gravitate toward it. At any rate, Moore said, let's take a walk, Jim. So we took a walk down the street. And he said, I'm really serious about if you want to join the Secret Service, I'd sponsor you. And I said, well, do I have to have a law degree or what? He said, not necessarily. I can do things. I figured he probably could. But the thing that got me, came back, and all of a sudden he just froze. He was looking at a picture that I took after the Navy ROTC building was bombed on the campus of the University of Washington in late February of 71. In fact, you could hear the concussion. We lived about 8 miles away from the, I think one person was injured. But at any rate, I was taking pictures, always taking pictures, and there was these two guys in suits that had earpieces. And I took a picture of them, and lo and behold, Moore wanted the picture. He says, "Who what was this guy's name?" He says, "Do you know his name?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, I'll buy the photograph. What do you want, $20?" And I said, "No, no, no. He's yours free." And he said, "No, no." He gave me a 5. It was an 11 by 14 of this, what I believe to be probably FBI guy. But Moore was startled. He actually held on to it like dear life. Finally, after a couple of nice conversations in between my wife and my stepsister, I guess you could call it, Marion and Elmer walked off. Now, that was one of the last times I saw him. I think. Now, he was with the church committee. Of course, you know, my testimony is not available.
Yeah, well, let's and I want to get because I want to talk now. So how did the church committee contact you? How did they contact you? And what did you testify about? And I understand there's no record of it.
Right. Here's the situation. In June of 75, I got a call at the apartment building that I was at, and I don't know how they found me. A man by the name of Bob Kelly. He introduced himself as a senior investigator for the church committee, and he was made aware of me by Richard E. Sprague. Sprague said that I was somebody that they should contact. And so I went and I gave him, a summary of my conversations with Gayton and Moore. And I think I asked him if I could have a copy of the talk we had, and he said, sure. Never got it. November comes up, and I get a phone call from this guy, Dan Dwyer. And he said, we interviewed Moore, and he said he talked to you. He didn't deny it. We talked with Gayton. He said he talked with me. Didn't deny it. So what we're going to do is we're going to subpoena you. And we want you to come January 5th, 1976. And we've got plane tickets for you from Northwestern Airlines out of Milwaukee to Washington and back. And we want you to write up a summary of your contacts with Gayton and Moore. And I said, fine. And they gave me an address to mail it, which I did. And then I took a flight from Mitchell Field in Milwaukee to National Airport in Washington, D.C. Cab driver drove me to the Senate side of the Capitol. And this guy, honest to God, could have been a double for Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know how many chins he had, but he was really nasty fella. He was using a lot of swear words about our esteemed statesman, and as well, oh boy, I finally got there. And frisked, went to the basement of the Senate side, went to a young Air Force officer, took which I kept a copy or made a copy of my subpoena. I gave it to the young lieutenant. He said, well, Mr. Gochenaur, have a seat in our lounge. And honest to God, here's the U.S. Senate. And he got this beat up old stained, I don't know, from the Victorian era, smelled like heck. So I got up and I sat in a chair. And about 20 minutes later, this young man, very young man, with a brown suit, 3-piece suit, introduced himself. His name was Paul Wallach, and he was the lead interrogator, I guess, for the Schweiker Hart subcommittee of the, pardon my pauses, I'm on some medications.
No problem. But just so people know, Richard Schweiker was a Republican senator. He later became Ronald Reagan's vice presidential nominee in '76. His unsuccessful bid against Gerald Ford, and Gary Hart, who had a real strong interest in the JFK assassination, starting with the Church Committee. You probably remember 1988 during his campaign was derailed by a young lady named Donna Rice. Supposedly,
Yeah, honey trap.
yeah, a lot of people at the time, of course, the media didn't, but I certainly connected that to his interest in JFK. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, what happened is that he sat down real close to me, and then his friend Dan Dwyer pulled up a chair and sat, and Wallach says, "Jim, you got to help us nail this guy, Elmer Moore. He's done such unethical things as law enforcement agent. Did he ever tell you that he sat, in on the executive sessions of the Warren Commission?" And I said, "No, he didn't say that. But what he did say is that he took tapes, documents, and notes from the Warren Commission outpost, sort of, to the White House." And I said, "Wow, I did. I didn't know he was that active." And he says, "Real active." And then all of a sudden, Dan Dwyer belts in, "Why in the heck would this guy talk to you in the first place? We know that he said that he didn't know who you are," which was a blatant lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I think it was rapport over history. We had long conversations about certain things." And he sort of backed off. And he says, he said, "Do you have a copy of the summary that was given to us?" And I says, "Yes, I had one in my folio," and I gave it to him. And he said, "Well, we'll be back in about 15 minutes and we'll do the deposition." I said, "Okay." And then I didn't notice that there was this guy in a gray trench coat. He was smoking like you couldn't believe. He had cigarettes piled up in the ashtray, still simmering,
Mm-hmm.
And he looked very pale. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he says, yeah, I'm okay." And I said, "Are you being deposed today?" And he says, "Yeah, I am." And he says to me, "Make sure you tell the truth, but don't volunteer anything." And that's what Harold Weisberg told me too. And I told him I was being deposed. Anyway, I was trying to think about it, and I sat down. They came to me and they introduced me to an Army major in full uniform who was going to be the stenographer. And I was very surprised at that. They introduced him, and I can't remember his last name, but I remember him as Major Dan. And he's carrying a big piece of equipment, and we got on an elevator and we went down, seems like 3 floors. And then we were walking along this long corridor, and he was telling me that we were going to one of the hotels that was near the Capitol that they made into office space. And we got there, and Major Dan set up a bunch of equipment, which didn't look like tape recorder. And we waited, and all of a sudden Senator Schreiber come in, and he shook my hand and swore me in. And just as it's ending that I'm taking the oath, 2 naval officers show up. One younger, one older, carrying satchels. They decided to sit right back of me. So if I look any which way, it's hard to see what was going on. And I noticed that Major Dan, his eyeballs bulged out when he saw the 2 Navy guys. And Schweiker says to Wallach, "Who are these guys? Who are these gentlemen?" was the way he put it. And Well, it goes over and they're whispering and whispering, whispering, goes back to Schweiker, and he says, well, let's proceed. And then we go down the list of what I talked with Moore, and a little bit about Carver Gayton. They weren't too interested in him. But at the end, the younger naval guy got up and talked to Wallach, and Wallach went over to Schweiker, and Schweiker says, Jim, were you ever intimidated? And I said, I am being intimidated by the question. I got up and looked back to the two naval guys, and man, they were robots. They didn't project any emotion. They just stared at me. So I sat down and I told about the Arboretum incident where my ex-wife and I decided to go downtown University Way to see a movie, get out of the house for a minute. So we were right next to Thomas Lane and North 23rd is where we lived, and there was a bus stop right across from us. So we're standing by the bus stop, and this guy pulls up, in which I think was a cornet, a very nice dressed guy. He says, you guys need a ride? Where are you going? I said, in the University District. He says, hop in, I'll take you. I said, that's great, you know. And so we're driving down 23rd Street, and he says, oh, you know, I got to make a call in the Arboretum. I want to talk to a couple of guys. Can you spare 15 minutes? And I says, yeah. And then as we drive down into the heart of the deep part of the Arboretum, he pulls his car up next to a big cliff in front, a big cliff going up on the driver's side, and on the passenger side, a drop off into the bay.
Wow.
He gets out of the car, and here we have the pistolitis again. He leaves his pistol on the front seat. Talk about sending a signal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he walks back maybe about 50 yards to a table, you know, a picnic table. Guys sitting on it, and there's a few other guys standing around. They didn't look like hippies or anything like a drug deal at all. They looked military in uniform. I mean, in civilian uniform, I should say.
Right.
And after a while, he came back, and we zoomed out of there. I didn't ask him about this pistol, but we're coming up on a Citgo station. I said, I got to go to the bathroom real bad. Can you pull over, wait for us? And he says, yeah, sure. I get out, and Marie and I scatter into the depth of this, you know, delicatessen type place, and he zooms off. And I said, this is intimidation. It's only a month from me talking with Moore. And as soon as I got through most of it, Schweiker stands up and he says, this session is ended. And as the two Navy guys are going out, they're smirking and laughing and smiling.
Wow.
It stuck with me. I mean, in telling it to Schweiker, I was very, very upset.
Do you think Schweiker seemed legitimately concerned with what you were saying?
I think he could have buried it because he wanted to protect me. But on the other hand, you know, what Wallach wanted me to do is stay over one night and stay in a room next to when they were going to interview Moore. And if Moore said he didn't know me, they were going to spring me on him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what happened was on the 6th, there's a full transcript of the interview, a deposition of Elmer Moore, and he readily admits that he talked to me. He said it was a friendly encounter. They show him the transcript. of my testimony. And Elmer says he's not telling the truth. There's something's out of context here. This kind of thing. Really avoidance. But it proves that there is a transcript.
But afterwards, so as of now, if we wanted to read your testimony for the church committee, it's not. There's no record of it.
You're not going to find it. You're not going to find it. It's either destroyed in the ONI files, Army files, or what I want to talk about, that I want you and everybody in the research committee to know about, is that they bury things like in the CIA library. You can't have no access to it.
Right, exactly. Well, I want to make sure we have time to go over, because you also testified, I presume, a few years later before the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Tell us about that. Is there a record of that? Are you listed as an official witness anywhere?
Yes, it's available. Okay. You can Google it.
And what was it? How did they contact you because they knew you had testified for the church committee? How did they find out about you? And who contacted you for the HSCA?
Well, it's interesting that Gilbert, who interviewed me, said that we are aware of the fact that you gave a excuse me, that you gave a affidavit to Senator Schweiker, and I said I never gave anybody.
Who interviewed you for the HSCA? I didn't catch his name.
Gilbert is the last name.
Gilbert, okay.
And his partner was Moriarty.
Okay.
Which fits in the Sherlock thing here.
Yeah.
Well, here we go to this time period. I've been trying to find my testimony, and I've been trying to delve into, if I can, the photographs that Richard E. Sprague took. And it ends up, it's in the CIA library.
Yeah.
So I guess I got to go over again, Taking of America 1, 2, 3. I'm in it.
Well, I think I told you on the phone, and if my audience doesn't know, when Hidden History, my first nonfiction book, was published, I found out that one of the first libraries to buy Hidden History for their collection was the CIA. So Hidden History, at least it was, and I presume it's still there, is in, at least that book of mine is in the CIA's library. Okay.
Yeah, and the curious thing, at the time I was in an executive search firm, Roth Young, and it was a telephone interview, and oh my God, my CEO was in on the conversation. Because he had that orange light on so everything I was saying to Gilbert, my boss was listening to. At the end of it, he pulled me into his office, and I went over everything with him. He was interested. And
well, you were the CEO. Where were you working for at the time? The CEO of what?
Roth Young. It was an executive search firm.
Oh, okay.
They specialized in hospitality and engineering and education. And my particular group was electrical engineers. I went from that to being a manager of auto glass outfit in Milwaukee called Modern Glass. And then one of the things that's got me going, and a number of friends that know what I experienced, is that Trevor Gayton is still alive.
Gayton Fonzie? No, he's not alive anymore.
Pardon me?
Gayton Fonzie?
No. Carver Gayton.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, he's ex-FBI, was friends with Jim Hosty. And he said that Hosty said to him that Oswald was a paid informant of the FBI, a PSI, potential security informant. And he was paid. But he didn't give any information, which is weird,
Mm-hmm.
if it's true. But the thing that got me was I decided to call Hosty and see if he would talk with me.
Mm-hmm.
This was September of 2008. I called him up, and a young man answered the phone by the name of Tom, his son. And he said, my dad doesn't feel very well. How can I help you? And I told him that I was the landlord that I had in Seattle was FBI agent, and he had talked with Hosty. He says, wait a minute, I'll ask my dad. About a minute goes by, and Hosty comes on, and I tell him my story. And he says, well, I'm sorry to tell you, Jim, that I was talking about Jack Ruby, not Oswald. And a guy by the name of Flynn was trying to handle Oswald, Ruby, and Ruby was avoiding him. But being paid. I mean, was our friend being paid Ruby by the Dallas police? Was it with Mossad, CIA? Just who is Jack Ruby?
Yes.
And the thing about it is, we talked fairly long, and he didn't sound well, Hosty. And he kept on talking about all the Air Force planes that were in the sky that afternoon, and I said, well, were they carrying, were you aware of, were they loaded ordnance, ready to snap somebody's neck? And he said, well, he didn't really know. But he said something that was interesting. He said, my initial situation and orders that came through, Shanklin, there was to, find Marina Oswald, because she had been writing in Russian to the Russian embassy to a guy by the name of Yevgeny Gurmadzov. And Gurmadzov apparently was the KGB handler of all the sleepers in North America. She addressed 3 letters to him. And so that was why he got on the band with Oswald. And
Hosty's a very interesting guy because he told a few people, he intimated that he would talk and tell all he knew if they would protect him. But of course, the authorities had no interest. A lot of us, I don't know if you do, but a lot of us believe that he was probably Oswald's, have been Oswald's contact. And, a lot of us think he was on, as Jim Garrison did, that Oswald at the time of the assassination was on assignment to infiltrate a group that he was told was going to kill the president. And Hosty may have been the guy he was reporting back to for the FBI. I don't know if you think that happened. Hosty seemed to want to talk, and nobody wanted to hear him.
Hosty's got a real problem. He talks to Lieutenant Jack Ravel,
yes,
and says that the FBI knew he was dangerous. But he said the same thing to a Secret Service agent by the name of, trying to think of his name now, Patterson.
Mm.
And Patterson's testimony is also missing.
Mm.
Of the Mary Farrell publishes a list
Yeah.
of everybody that was there. I went to every one that testified, and they did not have an Army major or a military person as a stenographer. I went and as either Ward and somebody stenography service, almost 90%. That's one thing that's an anomaly. There's a few others, but the thing that gets me is like Doug Horn for the ARB.
Yes,
has
he's been
about
on the show.
pages devoted to me.
Mm-hmm. I've
And-
got some on you in my upcoming book, The American Memory Hole, too. So I'm sure lots of people are referring to you.
Yes. And the thing about it is, what I'm doing is that I'm trying to connect with people like yourself and trying to say that I don't know who pulled the trigger in Dealey Plaza. But what I do know and what I experienced was a very intensive cover up. And actors in it is, of course, Moore and Hosty. I called Jack Reville 2 days after I talked to Hosty, and he was fuming about the corruption of the Dallas police force.
This is Jack Reville?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And he was very friendly. The next time I tried to call him, he must have passed away because the phone is no longer available or whatever they had down there in Texas.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is he swears up and down that's what Hosty told him, that the FBI knew Oswald was a danger. And as the protocol, Reville should have been notified weeks before, the motorcade.
Right, exactly. So you testified before the House Select Committee, and that's actually available. But I think I asked you earlier, what got you started? I guess you were in college in the I guess late '60s, early '70s, whatever we were talking about. But when did you read the early books by Mark Lane and Weisberg and said what got you interested in the JFK assassination to start doing research?
Elmer Moore.
But how did you find out about Elmer Moore? He's not. I mean, he's only known to people like us.
Total coincidence, if you believe in coincidence, a synchronicity of coincidence.
Yeah.
You got this situation where I thought the FBI could help me.
Mm-hmm.
They said, no, this guy in the Secret Service here in Seattle can help you. And he directly got into Elmer's phone. And from that point on, I got interested. And, when people throw a challenge at me, like he said, look up 3 good questions about that interview, I was off and running. But prior to that, I was sort of stereotypic hippie, kind of floating around,
Mm-hmm.
not very serious about anything but art. I mean, it was like I took care of myself. I mean, I got jobs and stuff. But on the other hand, I didn't like listening to the news. It's like today, I don't like listening to the news.
Yeah. None of us do, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was very, very much a coincidence that I became interested in it.
Well, I want to make sure we don't forget this, or because I put it up on the screen if you can see it. Our mutual friend Steve Cameron, and thanks Steve for hooking us up. He said, if you get a chance, ask Jim about the CCTV van that was in Dealey Plaza. That sounds interesting. Closed circuit TV van.
Circuit TV.
So he said the CCTV van that was in Dealey Plaza.
Oh, yeah. I scan a lot of the people we don't know, under the thing. There's a guy by the name of Steve Osborne.
Yes, he's the one that didn't he test for the select committee about this?
No, the ARB.
Okay.
The ARB.
ARB, that's it. Yeah, go ahead and tell the story. I have that in the next book too. Yeah, go ahead and tell the story. It's
okay. Well, I started to read his testimony, and I was saying, wow. He says that he, by chance, ran into a soldier from Fort Hood. And the guy told him he was in an intelligence unit that worked with closed circuit TV, and that they were active in Dealey Plaza on the day that the Kennedy was shot. And so I looked up closed circuit TV equipment, and it was available then. The big hulky stuff, though, they would have had to been in buildings, because outside you'd have seen them.
Right.
And what this guy says is that they pushed everything to a semi-trailer tractor near Elm Street, and you can see a laundry truck, and then behind the laundry truck there is a semi, you know. And what Steve Osborne is saying is that the army guy said that about 10 minutes after the assassination, that semi was on the road, but then it was intercepted and guys in suits got all the equipment.
Yeah, we've never seen. Apparently, the video was taken, and there was audio as well. I think they left the microphone, in a strategic location or something, and we've never seen or heard anything of that. And Osborne is the only person referring to this, right?
As far as I know, yes. I tried to get a hold of him. He's on Facebook,
Oh, is he? Okay.
but he never replies back.
Okay.
I'm still trying. I know a guy that whose uncle was that Don Reynolds guy that was testifying against LBJ the day he was assassinated.
Oh, the assassination. He was testifying in Congress about Billy Saul Ellis, all these scandals that were going to get Lyndon Johnson kicked off the ticket in 1964, probably. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Well, at any rate, this guy's a friend of mine, and he lives in Muncie, Indiana. He's on the trail. There's another person who I've been trying to find. Working with Doug Horn on the ARB was a lady by the name of Joan D. Zimmerman.
Yeah, you mentioned her. Yeah, that's she sounds fascinating. She's apparently just vanished, right?
Well, one of my friends was talking with Horn in this year's Lancer conference, and he said that she abruptly left the ARB, sort of like Ann Butimer.
Yeah.
Ann Butimer was talking with this guy Wheaton, who was spilling all kinds of stuff. She went to New Orleans, came back, and nobody knows anything about her now.
Well, this Rita Musgrave, I'll have a lot about her in my upcoming book, The American Memory Hole, who was working with Roger Craig and Penn Jones back in. She just, we don't know what happened to her. I think she was murdered. She died. I checked with everybody, the funeral home, the sheriff's office. She died in a very small town. Couldn't find anything, any details about how she died. And her husband died like the next month. And they both were, very young. So it's she did a lot of research.
Bob, thank you for letting me know about that, because she took a memo to Jeremy Gunn.
Yes.
In the ARB that listed people that we should get the files on, and it listed Angleton, Hosty, Sylvia Audio, a couple other people, and me.
Well, who wrote this? Was it Rita Musgrave or Zimmerman?
No, it was Ann Butimer.
Oh, Ann Butimer. Okay, yeah, okay.
Well, the thing about Joan Zimmerman is that Horn is resistant to really talking about her, but the thing is she had the most filed boxes of any of them, something like 18. And in box 7, it's Elmer Moore and Jim Gochenaur.
There you go.
And that's what I'm looking for, I mean, they put you through these labyrinths. It's very difficult to, get these papers that would help connect the dots. And I think she had the title is James Gochenaur 1-5. 76, that's when I was deposed. Mm-hmm. So that's in her files. Now, get this. This is really crazy. There was a lone nutter by the name of Ken Ron.
Oh, yes, I know. Yep.
Out of the University of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
He's a meteorologist or something like that.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of time on me. He wrote a very, very interesting sort of essay about my adventures. And he brought up the thing that, well, my staff and I are trying to get information about, my testimony, but we've been roadblocked, so from both angles. Now there's a critic by the name of Fred Litwin who's pecking on me.
Oh yeah, he's a big lone nutter now. Yeah.
If you want to see him at work on me and how he disconnects stuff, if you Google
he's got a blog.
Jim Gochenaur /JFK, that's one thing I use on Google. If I'm looking for somebody, I do a /JFK for it. And yeah, there's some missing pieces here. I think, as Harold Eisberg told me, that the House Committee and the committee on, the Schweiker-Hart Subcommittee on Assassinations of the Church Committee the managers are running things that block up holes in their their endeavor to cover this up. It's like, the false leads, all sorts of different types of things of gymnastic type stuff. Acrobatic stuff you have to go through to find something.
Yeah.
And when you find it, it could be redacted and or edited.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust a lot of the stuff that comes out, I mean, you got public access reading some of it, what does this have to do with the case, Yeah,
well, it's amazing. You deserve a lot of credit for trying to find this stuff, and they do put up lots of roadblocks in your way, and you can't even find your testimony from the church committee. But you testified for both of these. Because what was your impression of the House Select Committee on Assassinations? When you talked to them, did you have any sense they were out for the truth or not? Most of us were very disillusioned by them.
Well, Bakley seems to be very intense about the mob being involved.
Yeah, the mafia did it. Yeah.
I think they were in a pyramid. They were sort of on the third or fourth tier of helpful, but if they did it at all, I would think of Santos Trafficante. No, there's a guy that outlasts everybody that were supposedly, you got a guy like the New Orleans
Marcelo.
Carlos Marcelo.
Yeah.
Supposedly confessed in prison. But no, they didn't. The mob didn't have control of the autopsy.
No, the mob couldn't have got the Secret Service to. I mean, the mob didn't control Elmer Moore, who's kind of strong arming you years later and is intimidating Dr. Malcolm Perry into lying. And they got the Secret Service to stand down and not react in 6-7 seconds of gunfire. They got the driver to pretty much stop the limo. I mean, that's not the mob that can do that.
Yeah, and you got this thing of security stripping, and I discussed it in Lincoln's case with Moore. That the guy that was guarding Lincoln decided to walk off.
Yep, John Parker.
Yep, and maybe Booth gave him a $5 gold coin and go to your, your favorite saloon. No, I think that Moore is probably right. The money. The hunt seems to be, the funnel. I mean, he hated Kennedy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to even at this point like to speculate even for names, but I find it fascinating that you interacted with these people. And Elmer, Elmer Moore is deceased now, I guess. And so did you try to contact him again any years later? Because you had contact with him in the early 1970s, right? Did you ever touch base with him again after that?
Well, I couldn't find his unlisted number.
Yeah, it's a common name too. More, yeah.
And in the 80s, that was easy to bury.
Yeah.
I got a call in early November of 87 from Jim Garrison.
Oh, wow. You touched on you, man. Wow, this is incredible. I don't know how people don't, you should be a household name in the research community, Jim. What did Garrison have to say to you?
It's funny. I gave a Lancer, not a Lancer, Larry Schnapp invited me to make a presentation in, 2018. I flew down to Dallas and they got me on with Dr. Miller, who was a physician surgeon. I was in Seattle at the same time, Elmer Moore and Dr. Miller and Dr. Perry, and I didn't know it. But here's the deal. Miller was talking with Dr. Perry after a very, very complex heart operation, and Miller asked him about, the frontal shot, and Perry said that it was definitely an entry wound. And Miller talked to Larry Schnapp, and Larry Schnapp got me down to Dallas. I gave my presentation. They only gave me 30 minutes, so it's kind of hard to cram it all in. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is that they opened up for questions and answers. Nobody was there. So I got up, I went into the lobby at the break. All of a sudden I'm surrounded with people with questions. It was like interesting indeed.
Yeah.
I think I've tried not to hide, but I've tried to be very low,
Yeah, you're flying under the radar. What I think I missed it. So when Garrison called you, what did Garrison say to you in 1987?
Oh, that was very interesting. He says, Jim, I'm pretty much aware of what happened with you, with this guy Elmer Moore. I found his number, and he said, Jim, give me an idea. Is this guy a bad guy or a good guy? And I said, well, Judge Garrison, I think he's a gray guy. For the reason is he gave me hints. He didn't, in January of 1972, we were on the phone together, and he says, Jim, I think we ought to cease talking about this. I'm going to retire in 2.5 years. Let's get together.
Yeah, sure.
Let's get together after I retired. And I tried to find him. I couldn't. Anyway,
well, how did Garrison
said that he was going to definitely try to talk to Moore, and I filled him in on the highlights. And what happened is that he put me in his book, I think, The Trails of the Assassins.
On the Trail of the Assassins, yeah.
As a footnote.
Okay.
And then Jim Douglas interviewed me.
Yeah, JFK and the Unspeakable, yeah.
Yeah. He was curious. Here I live in Milwaukee, and he comes to Milwaukee to Marquette University, and he never let me know, because I would have loved to meet him. I know he's probably a busy guy, but,
This is Jim Douglas came there, but he didn't look you up?
Yeah, he didn't contact me. I would have given him some documents.
Yeah.
There's a very shocking affidavit about Carver Gayton. Whereas in Carver Gayton says that Hosty was ordered to go to Captain Fritz's office and retrieve bullet fragments.
Wow. Now Carver
And I'm
Gabin,
thinking, I'm saying, hey,
again, who's Carver
that,
Gabin again? Carver Gabin was with the church committee or the
no,
HSCA?
no. He was an ex-FBI agent that was my landlord.
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about Carver is that I think he got a lot more information from Hosty than what he gave to me. And that's what I tried to tell Jim D'Ingenio. If you can, if your staff can, please try to contact Carver Gayton. He's 84 years old.
He's still
He's
alive.
living, he's alive. And I've got his phone number, and I've left message after message after message. No answer.
Also, he won't get back to you, even though he knows you well. You're his tenant, right?
Well, what the heck? He and his wife Mona took us out, Marie and I, out to some really posh places, and I could never afford going to a dinner in some of those places, in Seattle.
And but repeat again. He said who was told? Hosty was told to go in Fritz's office and remove fragments, or who was told that?
Yeah, it was in his top drawer. Where did they have? It begs the question: where did the DPT have access to the limos or the body?
Exactly, boy. That's quite an allegation. Yeah, people ought to try to. What did you talk to Eugenio? I know him kind of. What did he have to say to you? Was he interested in you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was in the documentary film.
Oh, you're in the Best Destiny Betrayed, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I have to check that out. Well,
yeah, I've got a few minutes in that, and then I'm in the book he had.
Okay, yeah, because he's I've interviewed him and everything, but yeah, this is fascinating stuff. We have about 8 minutes left, so I want to make sure if there's anything we missed, or because you have so many things to talk about. What do you want to talk about? You haven't talked about it to give you enough time to talk about it.
Oh, my looking into a guy by the name of Liggett, who was a guy that did very good work in restoration of corpse, so that they can have the family and friends could view the body. Out of Dallas, and he gets a phone call to get to Parkland with a casket. He gets there, nothing, gets home with his family, and they get into a car and they travel to Galveston. When he finds out that Oswald whacked, Ruby, he says, it's all clear now. We can go back. There's a few people who are interested in Liggett. Liggett was a guy that towards the end of his life shot and killed a man by the name of Jay Peck, who was
this is Johnson's double, right?
Johnson's double.
Yes, I know about Liggett. Yeah,
Liggett shows up to finish the job on Peck's wife, but he screws up, and she lives and identifies him as the guy that tried to kill her.
So this is an embalmer that's going around killing people, and Jay Peck looks so much like Lyndon Johnson that
he went on a Johnny Carson show.
Yeah, he went, and I think that's been scrubbed from their archives, but he did go on the Tonight Show. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that there's names. I believe there's names that are just overlooked.
Well, absolutely. That Liggett is. Yeah, he's a very. I mean, what? How do you go from? Why would you go from embalmer to hitman? I guess. I mean, that's a curious combination there. Really.
Well, take a look at Mac Wallace.
Yeah,
LBJ. Here's a guy that is very gifted economist, PhD. He teaches at prestigious places, and the guy goes around and he whacks people.
For LBJ, personally, originally his fingerprint was said to have been found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, where they claimed shots were fired from where Oswald worked. Later, Joan Mellon, who I know about my friend, other people have claimed that maybe that's not true. I don't know, but I find it fascinating that they ever even said that. And there's indications that Wallace he may have whacked other people, including there are indications LBJ may have put on a contract on his own sister, Josepha
Oh,
Johnson.
yeah, yeah. Well, she was a link to the golf cart guy, and Mac Wallace.
Yeah.
She's kind of a strange girl, but she ends up at a party, Christmas party, I thought, and somebody smothered her, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tale of too many murders.
Well, LBJ had he had a body count before the Clintons came along. He had a huge body count. LBJ was it was very impressive. Unfortunately, I want to make sure. So, anything else? Because we've got 4 minutes, and I don't want to. You have so much information. I think I've asked you everything I need to, and you need to write a book. I told you. You said you kind of started to do that because you've got.
Well, I got it in segments, and what I'm looking for is that my notes and my negative library thing and my cameras were all stolen in '77.
Oh, jeez.
It was the negative folios. It was 3 big binders of pictures, and then there was my notes with more. And to a certain degree, Gayton, I had to, after I talked to him, I had to get the notes down, But I had a technique. And when I was at University of Wisconsin Whitewater before I went to South Dakota, I had to get to the bachelor's degree. I had to take a sort of an English course, and they weren't available, but a journalism one was. And this Dr. Collins gave a hint that if you're not allowed to take notes, take a look at your wristwatch or a watch or a clock in the room you're at interviewing somebody. Because when there's an important point, look at the time.
And Steve Cameron, our mutual friend, chimes in to say, Jim is writing a chapter from my book, Frame Up the Conspiracy to Falsely Incriminate Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll be talking about Steve down the road for that when it's released. Looking forward to that book. And Jim, you contributed a chapter. What did you write the chapter on for that?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like Cameron. He's a cool guy.
Yes, he is.
Who I'm trying to contact and work with is Gary Shaw.
Oh, I love Gary Shaw. I can try to. Have you talked to him?
Phil Singer, one of my close friends in Chicago, sent my email and my telephone number to him. I wanted to talk about and expand the whole thing about Richard E. Sprague, because I think laying in Richard's sort of sermons, there's something that they want to completely hold on to.
Yeah. That's a good book. I mean, I have it somewhere, and it's a good book. But so I can try to contact Gary Shaw. He's been on my show, and he's a great guy. I'm a great admirer of. I think maybe the most underrated book on the JFK assassination is his book Cover Up. That came out in 76. Yeah, I have it here, but it's just for the photographs alone. I mean, it's got a wealth of great photos in it.
Yep, and I think that's where some of the answers lie. I think that Morris's collection of it, and it was thick. It was about, in that folio, there were 8x10s. There was a couple of 11 by 14s, but I'm telling you, that was thick. And he didn't want me to continue to look in it.
He's obviously trying to cover up something there. So I hope you can come out eventually with your own book. So you have you don't have any notes left? They were stolen in 77, so you don't have the notes of the pictures? What
come to think of it, I've got a whole section on kind of the middle of the meeting, sort of the transition from talking about Oswald to his ideas about the trajectory of bullets. And he said that, well, it's like if Jim, do you hunt deer? And I said, no, I hunted a chipmunk, and I decided not to kill anymore.
Yeah.
No, I went out with my grandpa with deer hunting. He's a very good outdoorsman, and we couldn't spot anything. And he did spot a chipmunk, but I blew him away, and I said, that's it. Turning in my 22.
Well, that's it, Jim. We're just about out of time. This we could go on and on. You're a fascinating guy. You've had a fascinating life.
Well,
And
thank you. I want to get the detail down, and I want there's a whole section of my experience here where I ran into a ex-Army captain who was loaned to the CIA. That stuff will get me killed.
Well,
But,
yeah. Well, people have commented in the chat that you're leading a dangerous life here. It's like Mission Impossible. So I mean, I think it's fascinating stuff, and I hope you can find stuff to write a book. We'll look for that chapter in Steve Cameron's book. Anything you want to promote? Do you have a website or anything that where people can find out more about you?
That would be great. I hope we can continue. And
we will.
devote one thing to a minute detail. Yeah, I'm glad that I got a hold of you, and I'm glad I met you.
Well,
I think I will,
So
if I can,
you don't have any website or.
No, I'm thinking, but I don't know how. I am so low tech, it's pathetic.
Yeah.
And with all my health issues, it's crazy.
Well, I appreciate you coming because I know you have health issues, and you seem very strong today, and everyone was intrigued by your story. And we're out of time. You don't have a website or anything to promote?
No.
Okay. Well, Jim Gochenaur, fascinating guy. We'll have to have you back on. I'll be talking to you more. You have my phone number. We'll talk more, and look for your chapter coming out in Steve Cameron's book. And again, thanks so much for being with us. It was wonderful talking to you. Thanks everybody out there for listening to I Protest. We'll talk to you next week. Same time.
Okay.
Take care, man.
You have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.